Hey, welcome to this segment of our program, everyone. And this segment is called Ask Dr. Mel. And our guest this evening, who's going to be putting up the questions, is Mike in Fairbanks. Mike, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you very much there, Dr. Mel. This is Mike Young here, your host on the road. We have got some really good email questions tonight there for you, Dr. Mel. And I'm looking forward to asking some questions in which we can get some definitive answers on the financial crisis that has torn apart our nation.
Okay, what's your question?
Well, you know, it seems like maybe we get tired of hearing about it, but sometimes there's a lot of confusion exactly the mortgage mess. It seems like as I toured the western United States, I saw a nation that was in distress. I saw many homes that were boarded up. I saw many commercial buildings that were shuttered, and more were being shuttered on the newscast as I was driving down the West Coast. It appears to me that the nation is down the toilet, and that we are into probably the fourth year of a Great Depression. And I see on newscasts also that the Irish and the Spaniards are going through the exact same foreclosure process that we here in the United States have gone through. The too big to fail banks, they are foreclosing. And is there any way, I know we've touched this a couple different times, but more people are hurting and more people are walking away from their houses in which they're upside down. But regarding this broken chain of title, is there any simple way to explain that where us common folk can understand that, you know, it seems like we're being screwed, but we don't quite understand how we got the royal screwing. And if you could make that simple and clear on the latest legal front, we'd most appreciate it.
Okay, what happened is the bankers created a new security, and it was a securitized mortgage obligation, they called it. And so they went out and they sold it to retirement funds, and they sold it to all kinds of people. The only thing they didn't do when they made a mortgage and securitized it, they didn't go and register it with the local courthouse. And that traditionally has been an obligation. And then you have somebody who services that mortgage. But in many cases, they did not properly do that. Now, they've tried to come after the fact, okay? And after everything has collapsed, and suddenly say, well, we're going to have our robo-signers sign it all up and do all the paperwork that we were supposed to do, and then we'll run to the local courthouse, and then we can foreclose. Well, that hasn't worked out very well, and a number of courts have ruled that what they have been trying to do has been illegal. And remember, they had what they called liar loans. You didn't have to give any type of documentation or proof of your financial condition. They just gave you a loan, and then they took those loans, got a pile of them. They did what they called securitize, and then they would take those and securitize combinations of those, and people like S&P would give it a AAA rating, which they never deserved. And so that's how they were used by pension plans and all kinds of other things. There was actually a vice president of Standard & Poor's who knew this was corrupt, refused to do it. But it's the big banks that led this effort. And we've never done it before, and it's caused all kinds of problems. And if they can't foreclose, if they can't prove that they have a mortgage obligation, there'll be trillions of dollars that go up in smoke. And right now, that's the direction in which the courts are going.
I see that, and it's okay. So what do we do? I mean, how do you correct a situation where you have $1 trillion of mortgages that have flaws on the chain of title?
Well, that's a good question. Nobody has an answer for that at this time. But we're hoping that some solution will be found. And so a lot of the corrupt foreclosure proceedings, things like that, are being halted in the various states. We probably need something done at the federal level, although the recording of mortgages was done at the county level, which is below the state, which is below the feds. And so this is ground that we've never been on before legally. And now there have been some foreclosures where the people owed nothing, and they simply came in with bogus paperwork, and the people said, but our house has been paid for, and they said, well, we're sorry, we're foreclosing it. And now the courts have gotten very cautious because it makes them look corrupt to just do anything the banksters tell them.
So the courts are no longer willing to rubber stamp all the fake robo-signed titles that the bankers have presented to the court, saying that we own this.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, it's an ongoing, rolling tragedy, and it affects more and more Americans every day. What you end up having is you have pension companies that have bought these things. I know there's a state, either Alabama or Arkansas, they just stopped making pension payments to the pensioners because of the garbage, the bad mortgage notes that were bundled together as a security, as a bond. They bought it. They're not receiving any income, and so now all the pensioners are not receiving their check that they've been counting on.
Now, fortunately, the Washington, D.C. real estate market has been quite stable so far.
Well, interesting that you mentioned Washington, D.C. What is the crime? Maybe you don't have the real estate crisis going on there, but what's your pulse in D.C. as far as the crime rate there? Is that it spiked at all?
Well, are you talking about the crime rate in Congress or the crime rate in the ghetto areas of the city?
Well, I think the ghetto is Congress, and so I think we're talking about the same beast.
I always tease about that. I haven't noticed that the crime rate is any higher in Congress. It's no better than it's been, and it's no worse. And but actually, the local areas where we used to have a lot of violent crime by poor people in ghettos is actually down a little bit.
Well, I think that wraps up today's email questions and follow-up discussions. Dr. Mel, thank you very much from Mike Young on the road with Coast to Coast.
Well, Mike, thanks for your questions this evening. And to our audience, please, if you have questions, why don't you send them in, and we'll do our very best to respond to them. Thank you, and good night.
If you'd like to be a guest, showcase your talent, or introduce your business to our community, or if you have any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Mel, you can email us from our website at coast2coasttv.com. Once again, that's coast2coasttv.com. Coming up next will be Man Around Town, who has been taking the pulse of our community.